All right, I want to welcome everybody to tonight's Fireside Chat with Lyndon LaRouche for Thursday, October 6th. Now, we're going to be doing something a bit different tonight because what we're going to do, and this is intended for all those that get on and join us, we need you all very, very deployed, very organized. We have a great need in the short term for all sorts of assistance, particularly financial, because of what we have unleashed in particular as of today. Now, this is, in order to get this across, what we're going to do is we're going to have a set of reports, and those reports will require me to open up the Q&A mode now, which I will do. Now, I'm opening that up because I know that there are several people that were involved in several activities that we had, for example, today, and we'll also be having tomorrow. We had activity at the Congress of the United States today. We had activity at the United Nations today. We had also a special rally that was done on behalf of the Diane Sayre for U.S. Senate campaign which we have to report on. And we had the press availability that happened. So what I'm doing is I'm opening up that queue so that various of the people that will or should be giving reports can get in there now, and we can go to that very shortly. What I will do is I will begin by talking a bit about the event of today. In that event, I'm going to characterize it by something that I wrote, which will be intended for tomorrow's briefing. It says, Helga Sepp LaRouche, in other words, deploys Schiller's Ibycus principle against Anglosphere's NATO fascism in Ukraine. Sepp LaRouche deploys Schiller's Ibycus principle against the Anglosphere's NATO fascism in Ukraine. And so what it says is, yesterday's, meaning now Thursday's, Executive Intelligence Review sponsored event, We Will Not Be Silenced, Speaking Truth in Times of War, allowed courageous journalists, present and former intelligence officers, political candidates, authors, and others that have been marked for death by a NATO-directed pogrom against the truth to not only speak out, but to also be given a clear idea how to join together to defeat the danger of thermonuclear war, whether that be by miscalculation or design. That event is reported below. It featured a never publicly discussed first-hand recounting of aspects of the near assassination of Helga Sepp LaRouche and Lyndon LaRouche 30 years ago to the day, October 6, 1986. The apparatus that attempted that double assassination then is the ancestor of the apparatus that must be dismantled today. So that was the opening paragraph. Now, by the way, I'm not seeing anybody in the queue, so press star 6 to get in the queue if you're one of the people that I've already talked to earlier in the day about giving reports. I want to get to those reports virtually immediately. If you're having some technical problem or whatever, you better let me know. I see somebody has already gotten in, so that means it's not a technical problem. That's good. So the others should get in because there's a very specific thing that I want to say about this to everybody right now. What we did today was that we suckered the people that have been coming after us at different times over the decades. We suckered them into a kind of swamp, a kind of quicksand from which they will find it very difficult to extricate themselves. Now, this is the kind of thing that people who think small never see the possibility of. But we don't think small, and we know how to do this. When someone attacks you, puts you on a kill list, what you have to do is not stand there terrified. What you have to do is not go talk to an authority or what you think is an authority like the FBI or the CIA or something to get you out of it. No, what you've got to do is you've got to go to the precise people that are going after you, and you have to kick them in the head. And you have to do that in a way which will perhaps not be obvious to them that you're going to do that, because you got to succeed. But once you kick them in the head, they've got to feel it. That is what our movement has done as of particularly today, and it happened over the arc of a period of time, starting from the end of July. It's something that we had to create or to shape in a certain way. And the way in which this has occurred was there is a ostensible operation being run through Ukraine to the Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation. Those of us who've been around long enough knew there was no way in hell that was coming out of Ukraine. This was a NATO operation and something coming out of the State Department, doing the usual nasty business that they do. Now, the problem involved is that you can't be an amateur in something like this. This is the kind of thing you really have to know something about, and you have to know something about what you're doing. But we do because of the decades in which we had to be on the front lines of trying to make sure that Lyndon LaRue stayed alive. And therefore, we understand how to do this. Someone like Donald Trump does not understand how to do this. It does not matter how much money you have or what your previous experience in life is or how you dealt with the mafia. That's not what this is. This is the big time, significantly bigger than what someone like a Donald Trump or even a George W. Bush or those kind of characters, even if you're related to some of the knuckle draggers, you don't necessarily know how the business works. So what had to be done is to try to find a way to bring this to these people. Now, this required an international campaign. And that international campaign was very much vectored upon and is very much vectored upon in different ways what somebody like Diane Sare is willing to do as a candidate for office. A few other people are also willing to do that, including people that are not us, like, for example, Jeff Young, the Democratic candidate from Kentucky for Congress, who is not us and has a lot of disagreements with us on a lot of things, but he's also not afraid to speak out and speak up for what he believes in. So there are other people that are available for this, but it's not enough to not be afraid. You have to have the ability to propose what needs to be done. And that's the thing that Helga, in specific, pioneered, particularly from what she's been doing it for the last couple of years with all these conferences, but specifically from July 3rd of this year, before the list came out, where Helga, at the time of the 4th of July, sort of, assumed the mantle of an American patriot, since no others seemed to be available to do that, and sort of stepped out there saying, okay, this is what the principle has to be. We have to stand up against this war, against the people that are perpetrating it, and in favor of a new security and development architecture. And we're asking that other people in the United States in particular, because the United States is the center of the problem and also the center of the solution, that other people have to step out and do the same. So that's what we did. So as a result of her doing that, and then what occurred with Blacklist, the kill list, certain individuals, particularly Scott Ritter, responding to certain discussions that he had with candidate Diane Sare, stepped up. Obviously, Scott was inclined to do that. He has been out there on his own doing things. He's a former International Atomic Energy Agency weapons inspector who had the guts to expose the fact that the United States was lying about weapons of mass destruction back in the 1990s. He's a person that knows from his own debriefing of relatives of Saddam Hussein that the Iraqis did not have these weapons. The people that disclosed that information to him paid with their lives for it. And he tried to use that to stop the second Iraq War, which is a completely illegal criminal act. It's a criminal act defined as criminal by the Nuremberg Codes. Was what's called a preventive war, which was precisely the basis for characterizing the Nazis as war criminals. What we did in Iraq, the way we did it, was identical to what the Nazis did. And is something that makes the trial of people like Bush and Cheney and so on a worthwhile endeavor. That won't happen unless it comes from the American people. And international court does not have the power to do that, no matter what people have caused you to perhaps believe about that. But what's important is that Scott Ritter took certain actions, and importantly, especially around that candidacy and around his own work, indicting the Congress of the United States for financing, subsidizing agencies of the Ukrainian government, which were, in fact, out to kill people like him, and using his own money paid into taxes to do that. So as a result of his actions and some others, a process began where the ice began to thaw around the personage and the name of Lyndon LaRouche enough that people were not so afraid of the ogre as to work with us to begin to actually get to the bottom of real Nazism in Ukraine, which particularly Scott and others have been very clear about. In today's event, which is the second of its type, we have one on September 7th. This is October 6th. There were others that came forward. There were many different reports given, and maybe people will have some comments about that, so I'll leave that to those people. But I will just say that several people expressed a sense of relief, gratitude, and admiration for what was being done by Helga LaRouche personally, because as Ray McGovern said, Helga was the only person that has had the guts, the courage to bring together the people that came together on that platform today. I think a total of 10 individuals that spoke and present what was presented. All right, so what I want to do and point this out to everybody that's now beginning to join us and so on is that, yes, we're giving you a report back, but there's a very specific thing that we need. There's many things we need, but I'll just be clear about this. We're going to just indicate that financial needs are at the very center of what we need right now. We had some drop in our income. I'm not really sure why during the week. We have had some personnel displacements because of medical problems and so forth. But at this point, because of what we did today, we better run like hell. And I don't mean run from the enemy, run toward the enemy, sort of like David did in the story of David and Goliath. Many people know about the slingshot side because that's kind of maybe not so much cute, but it's sort of people can understand that. But what they don't remember or don't know is that after Goliath was knocked down by the slingshot, which is what happened, he wasn't killed by it, knocked down, just stunned. David had to run up to him quickly, grab his sword, and cut his head off because he was so large that you had to use a weapon as large as he was, basically. And that's what had to happen. So once you hit him in the head and stun him, what the next step was to run like hell toward him and cut off his head. This is the character of how one has to fight if you actually want to have a new, just security and development architecture. You do not ask for it, you organize it, and you take it. So this has been sort of this is not if this sounds new to some people, I apologize. But frankly, this organization has always been about the idea, when it can and if it can, of taking the initiative to take the power of the American citizenry. It's all in the Declaration of Independence. It's all in the Constitution. None of this is new. None of this is, quote, revolutionary or communist. It's all there. It's just that, unfortunately, most Americans can't read any longer. And when they do read, they don't think the words mean anything. Maybe it's because they're smoking marijuana or whatever it may be, but they don't get it. No, it means you. It doesn't mean some elected representative, although that person should be held accountable. It doesn't mean some political party, although perhaps there are some people in those political parties that mean something. It doesn't mean some vague rich guy that's supposed to solve your problem. You were supposed to solve your problem, and like it or not, you were born into a country which put that awesome responsibility on your shoulders. So Americans do not have the right to walk away from that. I don't care what color they are, ethnic group they are, etc. None of them have the right to walk away from that. Most of the problem of our national life is that most Americans walk away from that power, that responsibility most of the time. And we are not about that. And so what we are about is building an independent movement, which is independent thinking, independently financed, independently deployed, and therefore independently successful. It doesn't base itself on whatever is out there. And you can name whatever your poison is of what's out there. But we're not based on any of it. What we're doing is we're trying to carve a pathway in the image of the founders of the nation, as they did, the hard way, because the hard way is the way that's permanent and it leads to durable survival. All right, so I want several people. I've got a couple people in the queue now. Press star 6 to get into the queue. I've already requested. I talked to various people about giving reports, so you should be connected. And so I'm going to go to the first two people, and I want to see other people in the queue immediately thereafter. Okay, so let me now go to the first person I've got up here. Okay, fine. Can you hear me?
Yep. So the first part of the day, we had a two-part deployment today in New York. It worked very efficiently because, fortunately, Chuck Schumer's office was literally a block and a half down the street from the UN. So got everything prepared the night before, got out early, hit the UN, and it was kind of interesting. There was a big sign that we had, which was a picture of the triple curve, starting from 1971 with the dollar being taken off the gold standard, the triple curve, and then the collapse of the financial paper crossing over, and then the little spot underneath there where it says, can you hear me?
Yeah, Chris, explain what the triple curve is. The people on that may not know what that is.
Okay, well, what Lynn had put out in 1996, I think it was, a schematic that he called the triple curve, and what you basically had was up until 1971, you had three lines that he portrayed as relatively straight, and one is the production. The second is money supply, and then financial aggregates. And so at a certain point, when Nixon took the dollar off the gold reserve in 1971, you had what Lynn described as a triple curve, where it's like a bell curve, where the productive economy begins to go down in a hyperbolic curve over time. The money supply begins to go up, and financial aggregates go up at an even faster rate. But at a certain point, that collapses, that blows out, and falls down below money supply. And so at the point at which that happens, it said, we had a little thing there that says, you are here, in the timeline going across where this crossing of the curves occurred. And the headline of the sign was, this is why they need a war now. So that was the sign that people were reacting to the most. And we stopped, I think the total count was five nations represented at the UN in various ways. Some of them were, like, for example, from a Middle Eastern country, there were two security guards, but they came over, two security guards from the consulate, and they came over specifically on the triple curve sign, said that's exactly right, and they were briefed, and then when the organizers said, can you leave your contacts? We'd like to get in touch with people. No, we're just talking to you as people. Absolutely not. So there was this kind of fear, but there was a European nation that came over, contributed. Yeah, got literature. Right? Yours. Oh, okay. Anyway, yeah, got a pamphlet, totally honed in on the war threat. You're Irish. Got the call. Yeah, the two key leaflets we were handing out was the call for a new security architecture from the Schiller Institute leaflet, but then we also had one of the latest TLO leaflets, which was on the Nord Stream explosions. So then at around 1 o'clock, so we raised about $150 out there, got a number of contacts. Then at 1 o'clock, we picked up everything, walked across a block and a half, and started to set up in front of Schumer's office. So that's where I can leave it off and somebody else can pick it up.
Great. Okay, I'm going to keep you here in the queue, Chris. I'm just going to silence you right now and go to the next person. And while I do that, let me say to everybody, as you're joining us, that we're doing something different tonight. We're not just doing a debriefing, which is not the idea. The idea is for various of you to know why. For example, I know, Diane can't be on. She's doing various events. Thousands of dollars are needed for her campaign. That's all I'll say. I'm not going to raise money for it. I just say that. And then there's other things that are needed in terms of our own work as a whole for the week. Generally speaking, we're working with about a $40,000 budget because of various reasons and because of the activity we've been involved in, particularly today. People have been diverted from some of that financial fundraising activity for that purpose. We're going to go to our next report. It's going to be about what we did in the Congress and what we're doing in the Congress. Okay. Are you able to hear me? Tim, are you there?
I can hear you, Dennis. Can you hear me?
Great. Yes. Now
you're
fine.
This is great. This is Tim Rush from Leesburg. We continue to be hitting more and more of Congress. Had 2 days on the Senate side this week. People might remember I called in last Thursday to give a report on a first foray into the Senate. The pattern continues of being able to get relatively high-level meetings, not with the senators themselves, but with top staff or staff that's very specifically dealing with foreign policy, armed services, Ukraine, et cetera. And in many cases, we're able to. We have to do some homework. Some prep work. Get emails into relevant levels, the legislative directors, the chief of staff, others. Giving some materials. So periodically they get back, and we're off in terms of being able to get a meeting and get them engaged. Otherwise, one very singular thing is that we're getting a group of people who are named on the Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation hit list, who have been participating in our activities, Schiller Institute conferences and so forth, to contact their congressman and from afar say, look, I can't get to Washington, but I've got people from the Schiller Institute. I need you to meet with them on my behalf. So that helped set up a meeting with about 3 congressional offices yesterday. We ended up with 4 meetings yesterday, 2 today, and one of the great delights was that 2 people who are named on the list, who many of people on this call may remember from outstanding contributions to Schiller conferences, Jim Jatras, who for about 17 years was a top staffer in something called the Senate Republican Policy Committee. He joined me yesterday, and then today Cliff Kirikoff, who had been a top staffer for the Foreign Relations Committee of the Senate back in the 1980s, early 1990s, other things after that. Both of them named on the list. They came in, and it made them, you walk into an office and you say, look, this is the list, and here is somebody on that list, and they have something important to tell you. Definitely got people's attention. One particularly remarkable meeting yesterday morning was with a somewhat younger staffer who was kind of an office policy. I don't know how to sort of freelancer in a certain way. He had the ear of the senator. He was not a lower level guy at all, but he didn't have a particular portfolio. We were able to not only lay out the whole picture of what's involved behind these hit lists and why it's so vital to confront that, so that beyond the issues of First Amendment rights and the physical threats to people, if you suppress debate on the alternatives to what is converging on a nuclear chicken game between U.S. and NATO on one side and Russia on the other, if you're reluctant to do that, you're giving a green light to potential obliteration of the human race. And the key thing to tell people is you've got to get exit ramps from the way the dynamic is now being set by the globalist transatlantic elite. Their agenda is to push things to the point that either they think they can get Russia to collapse and then move on to China, or you get nuclear war, and they're willing to run that risk. So you have to throw something in that forces attention to the fact that you've got any number. We're leading the fight on the connection between the strategic crisis and the economic breakdown, and how to resolve that with LaRouche's 4 laws and the new Bretton Woods and the 4 powers and so forth. When we started developing that with this staffer, at a certain point he got much more. He didn't drop it, but he wanted to. He was thirsty to get a picture of what the economics we were talking about was. And as we developed it, he looked at us and says, "Oh, you're talking about the American system." And we practically fell off our chairs, because outside of us, I mean, who walks in and and uses the term American system? And then he said, "And I want to tell me more about what you mean by directed credit." So I began to develop a bit about Alexander Hamilton's First National Bank, and et cetera. And he looked up and he said, "Oh, you're talking about internal improvements," which was the Clay American system shorthand for that, which Lincoln adopted. So it was extraordinary, and he kept wanting to get the connections between the economics and the strategic crisis. And at a certain point, he said, "This is really important, because I can't figure out what's in it for the elite, whatever you want to call it, the deep state, anything you want to name it. I can't figure out what's in it for them to blow up the world." And so it was a perfect opening to just say, look, we're talking about 2 species differences, the American system and the British system. And the British system, which is blowing apart in the Western world right now. The people running the British system are desperate to cheat all the populations of the West of any alternative that would bring the American system back. And the fact that Russia, to some extent, and particularly China to a large extent, in very fruitful interaction with the LaRouche movement, have moved over to the American system side. That's, from the standpoint of London Wall Street, that's a casus belli. And he got it. So he kept coming back to it to get it in a way that he could present to the senator. He recognized this was absolutely crucial. He had to get it to the senator. In several of the other meetings, it was more nuts and bolts and sense. So what are you asking us to do? And we were discussing things like immediately demanding cutting off any money in the upcoming budget that would go to the Center for Countering Disinformation, the CCD. You can do an audit of the money that's gone in there. You could, one senator's office sent over a request to the State Department with our material, saying, what do you say about this? And they got back something that actually had in it new leads for us. The State Department was covering up a lot of what it was doing, but it admitted to things that we didn't know about. So you begin to get a certain ferment, a certain kind of buzz, where more and more offices are coordinating among themselves, figuring out what to do. We're not yet at a tipping point in terms of getting action on this stuff, but you could see a potential building up. And I think that we didn't get any squawks about the dangers of what the blowing up of these gas pipelines under the Baltic Sea means, and that is, you can rule out Russia. You don't know who did it, but you can pretty much rule out Russia. But what happens if a similar kind of thing with a tactical nuke in some contested part of Ukraine is presented as Russia doing it, and suddenly you're off to the races in terms of response to a supposed Russian nuclear attack? People got just how dangerous this is, and I think the question of going at the CCD and seeing the role of the Schiller Institute there with the first 31 names and Helga now at the position number 1, they got an idea that that this is something. If you scan, this is such a scandal. You have sitting congressman, a senator like Rand Paul on the list. We've discussed this on other previous Fireside chats, and I think many people may be familiar. It's quite a roster. Now, in the recent edition of 24 more names this week, you've got Tucker Carlson in there and the president of Uganda, Museveni. So people get it, that this is something that you don't have to win a policy debate over this. It's just to open and shut something that is intolerable and dangerous. They got it that you have to do that to open up the alternatives, the exit ramps before we go off the cliff in terms of nuclear war. The one thing I just wanted to add is that it was very effective, and this is something, Dennis, that you had brought up a couple of mornings ago, but it was important. I was able to, at certain points, bring up, especially today, that it was the 36th anniversary of the big 400-person raid on the LaRouche headquarters here in Leesburg, Virginia. SWAT teams, helicopters, APCs, the works, and the reason they were going, we didn't have to argue who LaRouche was and what the subsequent history of how he was railroaded into prison and so forth. Just say, why was that overkill demonstration of brute force so disproportionate to anything involved in seizing records from empty offices? And I would just say, it was the American system that they wanted to shut, that they didn't want Americans to be able to turn back to the American system. And look, and now 36 years afterwards, who's the top of this list of the Ukrainians under NATO sponsorship and U.S. sponsorship? It's Helga Zepp-LaRouche. Same reason. Terrified that we have conditions now that are ripening to have the American system brought back. World, not just in China or wherever, but you get into the United States and elsewhere, and humanity is on a completely different road. So I think that struck people. Some of the meetings were very short. One with a chief of staff in an important Senate office that we hadn't expected, but we had done the homework and we walked in and he made the time. But these, I think, what I've touched on here, I think gives you a sense that these are not business as usual lobbying on an issue. It gets to something that jumps the rails in terms of what Congress normally deals with, and there is a response. We have to intensify it, and people on this call, I urge people to continue to get to think through how to intersect Congress now that both houses are largely not in, the Congress members of Congress themselves are not in Washington, even though some of their staff is. But there's going to be much more that you can intersect in terms of town hall meetings, the kind of thing that Jose Vega reported from a week ago. Beautiful intervention against two congressmen in Bronx that then rocketed out through, I think Jimmy Dore show aired part of the video of that, and otherwise, hundreds of thousands of views. So I'm not telling people that you can expect that, but in all cases, but just plunge into this stuff, raise this issue. We have to shut down U.S. funding for an operation in Ukraine involving neo-Nazi networks that are targeting Americans who are trying to get us out of nuclear war, trying to make sure that we extricate humanity from the danger of a nuclear war. What are you going to do about it?
I have a question. Was the staffer with a Republican or Democratic congressperson?
These were all Republican. Oh, no, all but one were Republican. The staffer that had the most interest on the American system was a Democrat.
Yeah, okay. That's extremely important for reasons I'm not going to take up right now, but I want to make sure everybody who's listening, particularly if you've just joined us, some more people have gotten on. What this call tonight is about is, we are doing an evaluation of certain of our activity of today, but that's not really what we're doing. What we have to do now is we have to get everybody we can geared up. People have to understand we have 5 weeks in which there's a very specific kind of breakthrough that needs to be made. And I'll tell a story about that right now just so that it's clear why. There's something called the National Security Archive. And this is a group that basically releases what have been classified documents. Well, they released something. They were talking about the fact that they had back in October 2002, they had a document that they released about the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis was not 13 days. It was 59 days, 5-9, way longer. And the reason for that was that by October 4th of 1962, nuclear weapons were on the island of Cuba. Now, let me be very clear so people understand something. What in popular view was the case was that there were sort of the makings of the nuclear weapons, or portions of them, or casings of them, or something were there. But the idea was that a group of ships were steaming toward Cuba, and they had nuclear missiles, and there was going to be this blockade, and we stopped the missiles by a blockade. That's kind of what people, at least if you were just out there in the public, as I and others were, 9 years old, 10 years old, you're just hearing about this. That's what happened. You thought. Did not happen. What actually happened was that there were nuclear weapons there by the 4th of October, not by the end of October. And in fact, they were ready to go. And this was not detected by American intelligence, not known to American intelligence, not corroborated by American intelligence for 30 years. Now, some people are aware that there were infamous fights between Kennedy and his generals about the idea of bombing, using nuclear weapons against the Cubans. And their claim was that they don't have the nuclear weapons there. We don't think they're there. Kennedy, the two Kennedys, prevented that from happening. One of them was dead a year later. The other one was dead 4 years later. But you know what? The rest of us are alive, probably because of what they did. So we're saying this because what we're asking you to do when you're here tonight and you're with us on the phone, we're telling you this is like that month 60 years ago. This is like that month 60 years ago. We, the American people, did not know what was happening 60 years ago. We knew something from what John Kennedy was able to tell us. But the truth of the matter was there were things unknown to John Kennedy. Unless, for example, Khrushchev may have conveyed that. I don't know that had happened. I don't believe it did. There's nothing that's indicated that, at least in memoirs up to now. Maybe that's the case. But if not, what we do know is that the military didn't know, the intelligence people didn't know. So what you're in, just with us tonight, just to say, is a very specific forward deployment. This is not about our organization trying to make its little mark in history. No, unfortunately or fortunately, we happen to be at the center of it all of a sudden. And we're being deployed and we're being listened to as much as we are deploying and trying to get people to listen. Let me repeat that last thing I said so people don't mystify it, don't make it up as some big Masonic thing, and don't think I'm trying to exaggerate. I am telling you we are being deployed as we are deploying. And the reason is that, in fact, there are some morons here who want to use nuclear weapons. And it is not Russia. It is not China. And you are responsible for stopping that, if it's going to be stopped. So, Kim, what I'm going to do is I'm going to silence you and then go to our next person who's going to give a report. Again, what we've had two so far. And now we're going to go to our next report, which is Jose, I believe. Are you there?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me okay?
It's a little bit muffled, a little bit kind of weak.
Hold on. How's this? Is this better?
Yeah, it's a little better.
Okay. I'll try and speak up and keep this as brief as I can. So this is Jose Vega here in New York. I just want to give a report on the press conference that we did this morning. This was attended by people like Diane Sayre, Helga Zep-LaRouche, Ray McGovern, Colonel Richard Black, Graham Fuller, Jeff Young was on too, I believe, and a whole bunch of journalists. Ava Bartlett was also on as well. And I believe almost all these people who I've just named are on this kill list that was put up by the Center for Countering Disinformation in Ukraine. We had over 1,000 people watching that live across multiple platforms. From the Schiller Institute YouTube channel, we had 600 people who tuned in live on there. We had another 400 people who tuned in live from the LaRouche Organization Facebook channel. We had, I think, another 100 people tune in from, another 100 people who tuned in from Diane Sayre's Facebook stream. Now, in the beginning of the press conference, we had played this video by Colonel Richard Black, which we had put out 2 days ago on the Schiller Institute YouTube channel. And according to the Schiller Institute YouTube channel, we're at 330,000 views on there. And on Diane's Facebook, I think it's up to about 20,000 views there as well. So as far as we know, it's about 350,000 views. There are some things that are incommensurable because people are taking clips and sections. People are taking clips and sections from that video, the Colonel Black video, and they are putting it on their own platforms, whether it be their Telegram, their Twitter, and it's very difficult to track and monitor that, but that's what people are doing. And I think post our press conference on the Schiller Institute YouTube channel, it has about 8,000 views, and it was a 3-hour press conference. And I also posted that and shared that onto various subreddits, one in particular who's very friendly to us, who the moderators of this subreddit are very friendly to us. They're called the Our Way of the Burn. They had pinned an announcement to their 90,000 followers of the link to the live stream, and they left the comment section open if anybody had any questions. We had received some questions and a lot of comments. The comments were mostly people who were appreciative of this happening. Comments saying, like, man, I hope this doesn't get ignored. And, I think that's all I have to report on, Dennis, unless I'm missing something.
That may be it. Let me just, one thing you say is that on the Black, what did you say it was, at 350,000? Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, well, basically the point is that's been up for, is it 48 hours now, I guess? It's been up?
Yeah, that's right.
This is just relevant for people to know that we are working on ways, and we will break out sections of today's, because it was 3 hours, right? We know people are not going to watch 3 hours. So what we're going to do is break down various of the presentations. We already have maybe 7 of those presentations broken down. We have Mira Tirada's presentation. We have David Pine's presentation. We have Colonel Black. We have Cliff Kirikoff. Those are all already broken out, so they can be used independently. And then we'll do some work and get Helga and some other things. And this, what we want people to do is to place these in your social media or in other locations where you think they may be picked up. Jose referenced, I guess, well, of course, the congressional mobilization was referenced before, and what happened was that we didn't try to seek out this Jimmy Dore platform. Jimmy Dore picked it up somehow. What's relevant about him is his platform has 1 million people who are subscribers to it. That doesn't mean 1 million people watch everything, but I think we were around, what was the last viewership on your intervention, Jose, from that site?
About 160,000 on Jimmy Dore's YouTube channel alone. And the intervention across social media from my platform, Daniel's, and Diane's is also at about 130,000 views.
I see, and that's in addition to the 160. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so what we're looking for, so everybody's aware of this, is that we're looking to get into the 7-figure level. We're not anywhere near that yet. We have to do more innovation, more work. But that's not because people aren't interested. It's because we got to be smart enough about how to reach them and to deploy ourselves accordingly. So I just wanted to let that be known or identify that. Yeah, okay, Jose, I think that's probably all we need from you right now. I'm going to mute you. I may bring some of you people back in. Particularly, I know, Chris, I may have to bring you back in for some reasons as well. All right. going to our next person, which is Isabel, who's going to be telling us about what we're doing tomorrow. This is, and you'll get a sense of the nuance. And what's relevant, I guess, I want to point out is you got to look at this as a 48-hour intervention. And there are a couple we'll say a little bit about the international implications. But Isabel, if you're there, I think I've unmuted you, and you can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're very clear.
I hear you. Okay. Okay, so, I thank all the people who have given reports until now, because then anyone can take the event that we are going to have tomorrow that was organized from Iberoamerica, and it's going to be transmitted to the United States or anyone outside the Iberoamerica. People can understand it in the context of all these recent events that we have been doing, but not only these recent events. I like to go back to when Helga started organizing again the Schiller Institute conferences, and especially when she started organizing with the Schiller Institute call for a new security and development architecture, because that's what we're speaking about right now. We have tomorrow a seminar that's going to be given with current and former legislators of Latin America and the Caribbean. The name of this event is Stop the War Before It Is Too Late. Eliminate the causes of the war dangers. And the way that the invitation is very short, and the way that we start the invitation, and it's good that Chris spoke about the triple curve of Lyndon LaRouche. The true cause of the danger of a nuclear war and of the escalation of the Russian-Ukraine conflict lies in the fact that the neoliberal transatlantic financial system is heading towards a systemic hyperinflationary breakdown crisis. And so what we are going to have 8 people speaking with Helga Sepp-LaRouche and Diane Sayre, and these are people from Guyana, from Trinidad and Tobago, from Peru, Colombia, and Mexico. And most of them are people who have a political life in their countries, like Fabiola Morales. She's a legislator. She's an acting legislator. She just won in Lima. She's the mayor of Lima, and she is the speaker, national speaker of her political party. Then we will have Donald Ramotar. He was once the president of Guyana. And we will have in Colombia Jorge Robledo, who was a senator. And So what we are looking at is that after we have been organizing not only in Iberoamerica, but in the U.S. and internationally, people are starting to speak, and they are recognizing that they have to do that with the Schiller Institute, and that's what it means, that these three people and others have decided to go to the public and have an event on this matter with us. The process of organizing has been very interesting to me because I've been calling people that signed this first call of the for a new architecture, security and development architecture, and it's people that support what Helga is doing specifically. They are completely moved with Helga. But when they see some of these people in the list, suddenly they say, oh, but this one should not be here. And then you have the possibility to start speaking about what the Schiller Institute really is doing and what we've been constructing today, and that brings us to what we had this morning. I don't know how it's going to come out tomorrow, Dennis. I hope it's going to come out great. That I will have to say afterwards. But the fact that we have these people today going out in public with Helga Sepp-LaRouche, that says a lot.
Yep, that's exactly right. And again, so people are clear, this is an event that's happening together, of course, with what we did this morning. It is accessible, I guess, for what you were saying. Isabel, let me just clarify. Is the event is in translation, or is it just in Spanish?
Oh, no, yes. If you go to the Schiller Institute website in English, mm-hmm. You have a Zoom link there. So the event is going to be in Spanish, but there's going to be interpretation, simultaneous interpretation into English.
Okay. All right. So that means that anybody that's on their phone tonight who wants to hear that event can hear that as well if they go to the site. And that will be at what time?
It's going to be at 10 a.m.
10 a.m. Okay.
From 10 a.m. East hour, Washington, D.C. hour.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Eastern Daylight Time. Okay. Very good. Okay. Yeah. Thank you a lot for that. And we're going to keep moving here. But again, we want that just gives people an idea. If you missed today and you would like to find out or get a sense of what's going on, then get on that event for tomorrow. Okay, I think we've got one other report here on today's, which we haven't actually gotten, the rally that Diane Sayre did, which was actually near the United Nations at Chuck Schumer's office. And I think the person that's giving that report should be with us there. Can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can't avoid it.
As it should be. Okay.
Please keep your name.
This is Lynn Speed, and this was really exciting. We had a rally with in front of Chuck Schumer's office, 48th Street and 3rd Avenue. rally actually took up the entire block between 48th and 49th. We completely dominated it. We had over 50 people participating in the rally. We had 3 huge banners, one of which read, "World War III, no thank you." And it had a picture of Chuck Schumer's face in a mushroom cloud. And near there was a big banner that said, "Exonerate Lyndon LaRouche." And then we had a third banner, even larger, which was my personal favorite because it was so good to organize around, which said, "Why is Schumer supporting Nazis in Ukraine?" Really large. And that was stopping people, getting people's attention, lots of people taking pictures from the road, cars passing by, as well as people, of course, walking by. And that particular banner had on the one side a picture of Schumer, and on the other side it had the Azov Battalion, their emblem. This is the with the Nazi symbol, which is just very, very clear. So some of us were calling out, stop Schumer's, stop Schumer's support for the Nazis, and this would really arrest people's attention. And if they asked the question why, actually only had to, or what are you talking about? Nazis in Ukraine, is that really true? You had simply to point to that symbol and tell people a few things, and they were getting material. Of the various people who were participating, we had a number of people who had been involved in Diane's petitioning, but also a number of new people who have met organizers since the petitioning began. And this is the first event of this type that we've really had where everybody could get together. So it wasn't just a petitioning squad or a table deployment with 4 or 5 people. Here were 50 people all together, dominating the entire street with leaflets, newspapers, the New Federalist, and other material. The leaflets we got out was the campaign statement which Diane prepared for today's rally. Is the suppression of the LaRouche candidate Diane Sayre a prelude to nuclear war? And it's just a very concise statement on the fact that Schumer has not only refused to debate Diane, but more significantly, he's refused to respond to Diane and others like Scott Ritter's inquiry about his vote to allocate funds for the CCD operation, which has placed numerous people, including leading military figures, honored veterans and others, political leaders, on a kill list. So that was what we were highlighting. We also had another leaflet which referred to the October 6th raid and the targeting over years, the operations against Lynn, which are precisely what has gotten us into the current mess that the world finds itself into, and the alternative in terms of economic development to stop the war and to do what's needed for the planet. So we probably got out close to 3,000 of the leaflets that were distributed there, with many people taking them afterwards. What I think was really striking, and I think people will get a sense from all of these reports, from the press conference that we've described, from the work on Capitol Hill, from what Isabel described, to what we're going to do tomorrow, is there is a totally different spirit that we are evoking, an involvement in the population. That's what we're seeing across the board in terms of a kind of self-activation. The people that were at the rally, and many of them, I mean, I knew because I knew the names from the petitioning, but people would come right up, you know, what are we getting out? Where's the leaflet? They wouldn't even ask, in most cases, what to say, and you would turn around, and on several occasions, looking up and down the street, you had dozens of conversations that were going on quite independently, not from our seasoned organizers, but from these activists, including several of the new activists. I don't know, they just got the idea, you know, where you throw people into a certain kind of sea, and they're swimming along, talking to people, and in cases where they couldn't answer questions, people would come over independently, spontaneously to another organizer and say, so-and-so's asked this question. I don't know how to answer it. Can you help with this? Can you answer that? So that I think was really exciting. Diane reviewed, of course, her whole the targeting of her, why she and 31 other people who have spoken at the Schiller conferences are at this list. On this list, the various our operations to stop the war danger. And then you had a few other speakers. Jose gave a short report on what citizens, the average citizen, can do in terms of confronting their congressmen and demanding that they take action, that they act on the truth. And a very moving presentation was actually given by one of our activists, Danette, from Queens, who talked about why she was there, that Diane was a person that cared about people and cared about everyone. And she described how she had almost drowned in her apartment last year when you had last year's storms because the infrastructure didn't exist, and so she was battling 7.5 feet of water that suddenly filled her basement apartment, and her life was saved because she was yelling, and her son, who's blind, was able to pull her out of a small basement window. But no one came down, even though people died in that situation. Several people died throughout the city during the storm, and that Diane was the only one who, and I think AOC was the person, the representative from that area, but Diane uniquely came, and not just for a photo op, but actually met with people, talked with the community, sat down in people's houses, and so on. While she was describing this, because generally people are kind of rushing by this site and they're grabbing literature, and every once in a while there's a few people that stop. But people slowed down, and several people stopped to hear this report. So I just think that's very important, because that's also an important aspect of the power of our campaign. We had labor activists. We had people from all of the boroughs, people that came from as far away as Poughkeepsie and Long Island to be involved, various community activists. Several organizers organized others to come and, or activists organized others to come and participate. So it was excellent. At the very end, a woman who is running for office herself has been on Diane's platform a couple of times before. She's a woman boxer, actually, but also has has her own media network or works for a media network. So they came and did an interview with Diane at the end and several others on the campaign. The event itself, I think Diane's presentation is up on the SARE Facebook page if people want to go see it, and we'll also have reports and pictures and so on, obviously, posted. At the end of the rally, several people came up to me wanting to know when was the next rally. What day are we doing it next week? Where are we going to be next week? So I think that one of the things we'll be discussing this with the candidate, but I think certainly we should have regular Thursday rallies or regular someday rallies every week, if not more, for the next 5 weeks leading into the election on November 8th. So people who are able to participate in such things who are on this call or who can even come in for the last few weeks of the campaign, as people did for the petitioning, that's certainly a standing invitation. This will move people. Several people giving their names saying, I didn't hear anything about this. This is really interesting. I really like this, the fact that somebody is saying something which is contrary to the narrative. So much more of this kind of thing can and will be done. So that's my report.
Okay, thanks a lot. Now let me just say to people sort of in closing or in summary. So you've heard the activity of today and you have a sense of it of tomorrow. Let me say the last Friday what happened was that Helga Sepp-LaRouche was on giving a presentation. It was actually Chinese media, but it had people on it from London and from other places. It was a symposium about the situation in Europe in terms of the rise of right-wing politics. Diane was doing something at the same time with Scott Ritter and with Colonel Black. And that kind of international deployment is what we're looking to do that. We're not merely talking about matters of, particular campaigns or anything like that. It's not the dynamic that we are looking for. We're looking for a different character of dynamic. And that character of dynamic involves us being able to elicit from people like yourselves, and for that matter, people like yourselves eliciting from other people, the fact that the American character, the American identity, the American prospect is take the situation that is so dire, take the situation that is so critical and do something about it. That's what we're doing. And so I don't know that I want to say a lot more about that right now. I think what you've heard should motivate things clearly. If you want to be involved in the rallies, get in touch with us. We'll certainly put you into that. If you want to be involved in other ways, sure, you can certainly get in touch with us in that respect as well. And I think I don't know that anybody has anything other to say right now. I would just say in summary that work around the Congress in particular and around the kill list is likely to bring together the most unusual form of united front that the country's seen in a long time. This is something I want everybody to spend some time thinking about, discussing, and working toward. We need money in various ways. We won't want to be more specific about that. I think everybody has a sense of what we mean by that. And we need your activity. So volunteer. If you can also, by the way, just take what we did today and we'll be doing tomorrow and reproduce that among your various layers, social media and related. That's going to be very important. So I think we're going to basically leave it at that now, and we'll see you on Saturday for the LaRouche Organization Manhattan Project, and otherwise see you here next week.